What if the most dangerous drug network in America wasn't hiding in the streets, but in the Statehouse itself? At 4:19 a.m., Massachusetts lit up like a battlefield, armored convoys, encrypted orders, and federal agents moving through the dark with one target: their own. What began as a quiet corruption probe exploded into a statewide operation that exposed an empire built behind government walls, an empire of drugs, cash, and power disguised as public service. This isn't just another crime story. It's a story about infiltration, how trust turns into leverage, and how systems built to protect us can be weaponized from within. Stay with me, because once you see what the FBI found behind those office doors, you'll never look at public trust the same way again. Would you have seen it coming before the lights turned red? 4:19 a.m. The command room outside Worcester was silent, except for the hum of monitors. On the main screen, Massachusetts glowed like a wound, 14 red markers pulsing in the dark. Each dot represented a suspected hub, safe houses, docks, and storage yards, tied to an invisible network that had infiltrated state offices. Then a single word appeared across the encrypted channel: action, all units. Within 60 seconds, engines ignited. Armored convoys rolled out under blackout mode. The DEA's Bravo 3, the FBI's Tactical Response Group, and local task units moved in a synchronized storm. 14 targets, 14 minutes, no warning. Lowell, Springfield, Worcester, and Fall River, all hit at once. From above, two Blackhawks cut through the mist, their rotors scattering rain across empty streets. At 4:46 a.m., the first breach detonated. A steel door at a mechanic's shop blew open, echoing through the block like thunder. Inside, rows of crates, neatly sealed and labeled as hydraulic fluid. When agents cracked the first one, they found something else. Brick-sized packages marked with coded triangles, 268 pounds of high-purity cocaine, and a ledger listing transactions totaling $27.4 million. Across the state, similar scenes unfolded: flashbangs, footsteps, and radio calls. By 4:58 a.m., 6 locations were secure. At 5:04 a.m., a warehouse in Springfield erupted in white sparks as agents seized a cache of synthetic narcotics weighing nearly half a ton. When dawn broke, the map no longer glowed red, it burned. 49 suspects detained, including uniformed officers. And this was only the opening move of a war no one realized had already begun. If you're still watching, tell me in the comments, would you have seen it coming before the lights turned red? Hours before the raids lit up the map, the silence inside the Springfield State Office building felt ordinary. Fluorescent lights humming, paperwork stacked neatly on polished desks. But at 1:20 a.m., that illusion broke. A steel door gave way with a hollow bang as federal agents entered the western branch of the governor's office. The sound rippled through the hallway like a warning no one wanted to hear. On the conference table sat a sealed courier box, marked for internal use only. When the DEA's forensic team cut it open, the air shifted. Inside were 9.4 kilograms of cocaine, a Glock 19 wrapped in a towel, and $46,800 in tightly folded bills. Around them, framed awards, government seals, and certificates of public integrity. But trust had already been sold. Standing beside the desk was Lamar Cook, Deputy Director for Western Massachusetts, the man who once spoke on camera about accountability and transparency. Now, the same hands that signed community funding papers were shaking in handcuffs. At 1:47 a.m., his office computer was seized. Encryption levels beyond standard government protocol triggered alarms inside the FBI cyber lab. What they found would change everything. 15 months of coded shipping records, 32 warehouse entries, and a list of government email domains that didn't belong to the DEA or the Treasury. It was the blueprint of infiltration, a map of how corruption had learned to wear a suit. And while the raids outside were closing in on warehouses and docks, here in the heart of state power, the real invasion had just been uncovered. By 2:27 a.m., the FBI's cyber forensics lab was a wall of light screens pulsing, code lines flickering like heartbeats. The laptop taken from Lamar Cook's desk wasn't ordinary. Its encryption layers weren't government grade, they were military. A triple encrypted system designed to self-wipe after 5 failed attempts. It took specialists nearly 7 hours and 3 custom-built decryption modules to break through. When the screen finally blinked alive, what appeared wasn't a personal document or schedule. It was an operational grid, rows of coordinates, transaction codes, and delivery manifests, all written in ciphers disguised as inventory data. Each entry corresponded to a shipment labeled as medical waste, hydraulic fluid, or construction sealant. But beneath the code, the truth unfolded. 22 shipments over a 15-month span, totaling nearly 1.8 tons of controlled substances. Embedded in the files were payment chains routed through regional departments, clerks, inspectors, procurement officers. People who were never on any cartel watch list. Every few pages, the same initials reappeared beside approval codes: S, D, L, C, J, M. The very officials tasked with reviewing import permits. At 2:54 a.m., one file stood out. It wasn't a manifest, it was a communication log. A thread between Cook's office and a courier service registered in Buffalo, New York. Each message used numerical timestamps identical to official state dispatch times. It meant the operation wasn't running beside the system. It was the system. When agents mapped the coordinates, the scale became clear. The shipments moved from El Paso, through Cleveland, into Springfield, and finally into the Boston commuter belt, a perfect corridor hidden inside legitimate logistics routes. For investigators, this wasn't just evidence. It was the architecture of a parallel government, one that answered not to voters, but to profit. By 3:22 a.m., investigators began connecting the dots. The coded shipments from Cook's laptop matched real-world routes. What emerged wasn't a random string of smuggling attempts. It was an infrastructure engineered to operate in plain sight. 4 primary distribution corridors cut through Massachusetts, camouflaged inside legal trade. Each route moved under the cover of everyday commerce. Produce, construction materials, pharmaceuticals, anything that justified sealed freight containers and steady schedules. At 4:05 a.m., agents raided a warehouse in Worcester that claimed to store agricultural equipment. Behind stacked pallets of fertilizer, they found 327 pounds of compressed cocaine, 94 pounds of synthetic opioids, and 3 industrial-grade pill presses capable of producing 60,000 counterfeit tablets per hour. The smell of engine oil and chemical resin filled the air, a perfect mask for the poison being built beneath it. The further the teams dug, the more the illusion cracked. Trucks belonging to state-contracted logistics companies carried concealed compartments welded into their chassis. Records showed over 190 deliveries marked as state-certified cargo, all cleared through official checkpoints. Each one passed unnoticed. By dawn, satellite data confirmed the scale, a continuous chain stretching from Albany, New York, through Worcester, down to Providence, Rhode Island, a drug corridor hiding inside legitimate supply lines. The front companies were real, the invoices legal, the signatures authentic, but the cargo was deadly. At 7:58 a.m., one analyst summarized it in a single line of his report. "This is not trafficking. This is governance." He wasn't exaggerating. The empire wasn't hiding from the system. It was the system, operating with the rhythm of bureaucracy and the precision of industry. And as investigators uncovered the logistics, another trail began to glow the money. By 8:10 a.m., the investigation had shifted from trucks to bank servers. The money trail told its own story. Quiet, elegant, and deliberate. Funds from the seized shipments were filtered through 2 private casinos in Rhode Island, both registered under shell corporations, with no employees and no signage. Within 6 months, over $14.7 million in cash had been exchanged for digital chips, then converted back into wire transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Puerto Rico. The deeper agents traced, the stranger it became. A community development foundation based in Boston had processed $12.3 million in donations from fake donors, many of whom turned out to be deceased or non-existent. That same nonprofit paid security consulting retainers to 5 municipal officials and community engagement fees to 2 former state police advisors. None of it raised alarms. Every transaction appeared clean. Another node emerged: a real estate investment group purchasing foreclosed homes near major highways. The pattern wasn't random. Each property sat within 1 mile of a verified drop point, giving the network both storage and surveillance advantages. By the time the financial map was complete, the numbers were staggering: $242 million in annual turnover, distributed through 11 shell companies and 32 accounts. The empire didn't need to hide in darkness anymore. It hid behind generosity, charity, and civic pride. The system wasn't just corrupted by greed, it had been redesigned around it. And what came next would no longer be an investigation. It would be cleansing. By 9:43 a.m., the command order was signed. The next phase would not involve sirens or gunfire, it would unfold in silence. Federal vans rolled towards 16 municipal buildings across Massachusetts. No lights, no noise, just warrants. Inside the Worcester precinct, officers gathered for their morning briefing. When the doors opened, not with weapons drawn, but with documentation, names were read aloud. 21 officers, 3 procurement advisors, and 2 deputy sheriffs were taken into custody before noon. Their badges, once symbols of duty, were sealed in evidence bags marked Integrity Breach, Phase 2. In Springfield, auditors opened filing cabinets and found $2.1 million in unreported community outreach funds. At the same time, in Boston, federal accountants froze 17 accounts linked to public contracts and quietly rerouted ongoing payments into forensic review. There were no protests, no shouting, only the dull sound of chairs scraping floors as the reality settled in. Trust had collapsed from within. By 12:26 p.m., an emergency directive formed the Public Integrity Restoration Bureau, tasked with auditing every state agency, tracing every unexplained dollar, and purging every compromised chain. What began as a drug case had evolved into something far larger, a state reclaiming its conscience, one warrant at a time. By the time the last van rolled away, the sun had already risen over a different Massachusetts. Inside evidence rooms, badges sat sealed in clear bags. Hard drives blinked under cold fluorescent light. On every floor of the Boston Federal Analysis Center, the same quiet truth lingered: the enemy had never been outside the gates. It had worn uniforms, signed papers, and smiled for cameras. The numbers told part of the story: 1.15 tons of narcotics seized, 134 illegal firearms removed, over $240 million traced and frozen. But statistics don't capture the silence left behind, the empty offices, the stunned communities, the veterans, and families who realized that betrayal hadn't come from a foreign threat, but from within the institutions they trusted. The operation didn't end with arrests. It began something else: a reckoning. The newly formed Public Integrity Restoration Bureau now audits every public dollar, every contract, every sworn oath. For the first time, transparency isn't a slogan, it's surveillance. The state is rebuilding, line by line, account by account. Yet beneath the headlines and press conferences lies a deeper question, one that no task force can solve. What happens when corruption becomes culture? When the system itself becomes the shelter for those it should expose? The truth is harsh. Laws can change, leadership can shift, but integrity has to be rebuilt by people. One act, one choice, one refusal to stay silent. Because this story was never just about cocaine or cash. It was about trust, about how easily it can be sold, and how painfully it must be earned back. If you've watched this far, you understand what's really at stake. So tell me in the comments, do you believe the fight for integrity is worth continuing? Tap like so, the story doesn't vanish into silence. Subscribe to stay with us because this war isn't over. Massachusetts was only the beginning. The next state won't fall this. Quietly,